Everyone, welcome to True House Stories. I am Lenny Fontana, coming out of NYC each and every week. As you know, we do it right here. Try to do one better, one greater than the other. And it's really hard because each person that comes on True House Stories has a huge story. And every one of the guests that we've had are giants in our field. And this man is no small potato. He is a legend of legends. Comes and hails from Brooklyn, New York. Brooklyn, New York, you know, Lenny's Pizza. John Travolta strolled down 86th Street. He knows all the moves. He even went to the paint store where John bought that paint in the movie. He went to all those discos that were going on during that time. And he was around the 80s and he was doing his thing. And we want to, you know, he's going to tell you all about it. He's fresh. He's worked with some of the greats, Arthur Baker. I mean, the list goes on and on. He was the baddest mofo I knew with a razor and a grease pen. The boy was bad. Used to take that reel, chop, cut, chop, move the tape. He was awesome at cutting and editing when editing tape was not only fashionable, but it was the only way to get work done. Now it's a fashionable thing. You got a tape machine, sounds fashionable. Wow, I got a tape machine. But back in those days, you would see him, he'd come out with tape all over him. Tape. I'm really busy right now. What do you need? I got, phones are ringing. He's got it all under control. He used to rock Shakedown. And he went from there. He worked with Tommy Musto and another great, Tommy Musto and the Brooklyn crew, Lenny D, Frankie Bones. We want to welcome to True House Stories, Brooklyn's own, the Italian stallion, Victor Simonelli.
Great to be with you, Len.
Welcome, Vic. Welcome.
Thank you, brother.
First, before we start to the first questions, everybody knows, how you holding up, bro? How you doing?
All right. I mean, we're dealing with this pandemic, so I mean, everything has changed since then. If we think about it, it's pretty much this week, a year ago, at least here in the States, that it all started to shut down. And then, wow, from there, everything changed. I mean, this week, a year ago, I was ready to go over I was going to leave for Paris. I had just arrived from the West Coast. I did a gig in Portland. The last DJ gig I had was in Portland about 4 days ago, a year ago.
Holy smoke.
Yeah, and I had just just because everything shut down. So this time a year ago, I was about to leave for Paris, and long story short, everything shut down, and pandemic just shut it all down. I was booked to have one of the fullest years I've ever had DJ gig wise last year, but the pandemic changed it all. I was supposed to be in Paris, London, the Philippines, Hong Kong, Korea. Spain. I've had so many gigs booked, and think about this, Len. Believe it or not, I've made the Winter Music Conference in Miami every year since 1988, except for 1 year that I had some family stuff to deal with. But other than that 1 year, I made it every year to Winter Music Conference, and last year hit, and that just killed it. But with that said, we can. There's plenty of other things that can be done, and for us to keep busy.
Sure.
As you created this show, I think you did a great thing. It's important for us to reinvent, and it's given me time to get into productions and do a lot of uploading of back catalog. So it's given me a lot of time to focus more on music and music making.
Yeah, and that's important.
Yeah.
And also, as many guys I have worked with on these 35 episodes, some special Sundays and stuff. The one thing I've heard everyone say, this has slowed everybody down to reflect on family.
Good point. Very good point.
Everybody has said the same thing to me. Like they've had time to really work out where their lives are.
Totally. It absolutely is. Actually, yeah, you're right. There's been some good quality family time. And it's probably the most time I've spent with family since I started.
Yeah, numero uno. Tell them in Italian and tell them in English. Go ahead, tell them, because you know what? My boy Vic, man, I give him a lot of credit, but we're going to get into the first question. He's an American-born Italian guy from Brooklyn.
Yeah, born in Brooklyn.
He doesn't get any more than that. When I'm talking about like funhouse driven, he would have a Cadillac, the whole deal. This is Italian American as it gets. And he learned Italian like a true Italian boy. He speaks it so fluent, so incredible. I love it.
Well,
Vic, no more. La famiglia numero uno, huh? Tell everybody.
Numero uno, certo, numero uno.
Sì.
Possiamo fare l'intervista in italiano se vuoi.
There you go. See what I mean?
Yeah, but I lived over there a good while then. So
Get into that. We're going to get into that. Okay, so everyone's waiting to hear me ask that first wonderful question. How does music find a young guy, young kid before you going out? Like, when is the first time you discover music or music discovers Victor?
Sure. That's a good question. So basically, look, I'm born into a house where it's full of records because my dad, he's a collector. So my earliest memories are digging through his collection. And oh boy, he had all kinds of music. He still does. He has a very large collection of all kinds of music. So when I would dig through his collection, he'd let me pull out records, and they were very colorful and they're very memorable back then. 70s, early 70s, the album covers were very entertaining almost for someone young. Not even mentioning the music, but they draw your interest to them. So I would pull him out and ask him to play him, and he would do that. He'd select some too. He'd show me what he liked and what he was feeling that day. And we wouldn't only listen, but we'd talk about it. And it was really my starting point of not only listening, but just dissecting music and really getting into it deeply, having an experience with music, not just listening to it. And, we'd listen to a tune and he'd ask me how it made me feel. He asked me how it made me feel. He asked me if I heard the lyrics, what does it mean to me? What thoughts it brings to mind? If I could describe what instruments I was hearing. So he'd really, from a very young age, get me listening deeply to music. And many times he would act it out as if it was being performed by him. In other words, like he was the performer of it. So it was really entertaining for me, and it made me get deeply into the music and listen deeply. And wow, one day, while looking through his collection, because I said, these album covers were very colorful and entertaining, I came across one that was the opposite. It was very simple then. And it was Dance and Shake Your Tambourine by the Universal Robot Band. And it was a very plain looking record. It was just a sort of a light blue label with a red sleeve. And it just said Universal Robot Band in very simple print with the production information, writer information. And it got me real curious. And we listened to that. And wow, it just, every time I talk about it, it takes me right back there listening to it for the first time. And I just found it really amazing that one song was on one side, a full side of a record. And that was my first exposure to a 12-inch single. I just found that really amazing of one record, and it was so simple looking. But then that really sparked my interest in the whole 12-inch side of things, and that side of things. And well, I'm sort of giving it to you chronologically. So shortly after that, probably.
I'm going to ask you this before.
Yeah.
You're saying your father being the band conductor, you like being a conductor.
Yeah.
Did that make you bond even more with your dad because of the music like that?
Definitely. Absolutely. I mean, music, it says things that words can't. Music says things that words can't. And it's a way of communicating without speaking. Instrumental or something with vocals. I'm not speaking about necessarily the lyrics in the song. I'm just talking about the feelings it expresses and the connection that you make with the person playing it. So absolutely, the answer is yes to your question. And I mean, how many friends have I got to know better through the music they listen to and play and share with me? You really get to know a person on a more deeper level than just having a conversation with them when music is involved. And so, yes, definitely, definitely my dad and I had that connection, the music connection there. And thanks to him, I had the introduction to music. Now, during that time, they sent me for piano lessons. And then eventually, I took even vocal lessons. I took guitar. Later on, I took drums. So I've taken all types of instruments. I've taken all types of lessons, but I'm jumping ahead a bit. My dad started to do some events just for young people, and he'd rent a dance hall, and people just for younger people, like a teen disco, I guess, right? And from there is when I really saw firsthand a DJ on the decks. Because again, this wasn't his business; he was just doing it for the love of it, and because he loved music, he loves music too. And simultaneously, I started to hear New York radio. New York radio was great at that time. You know that.
Yeah. Many times I've spoken about this with you.
Definitely. We had.
I'll let you paint that picture. I'm not going to say it. You will.
Sure.
Tell us from your eyes and your ears what that was like. New York radio.
Yeah. Look, New York radio at the time was just sort of a megaphone for clubs across the city. In other words, it's like what it is. Whatever the clubs were playing was being broadcast on New York radio at that time. So you could be at home and be listening to what was being played in all the best clubs. And why is that? Because the program directors were spending so much time at the clubs. For instance, Frankie Crocker, you've shared that. He was spending so much time at the garage and so many clubs in New York. He'd hear what was happening and then he'd bring it to BLS. And the same thing down at KTU, 92 KTU at the time. Who was it? It was I'm trying to think of that program director's name.
Carlos?
No, before Carlos. Later Carlos, absolutely Carlos, but before Carlos.
Yes, that was Carlos at the end towards 79, 80, and then it was a guy right before, Jeff something.
I'm trying to think of his name then. Anyway, he would spend time in the clubs, and it'll come to me. The name will come to me. But and Carlos too. I mean, Carlos eventually even had that New York Hot Tracks, which is the only way in New York City we could watch videos at that time, if you remember, for the most part, without cable TV anyway. But New York radio really exposed people that weren't going to clubs to club life and club music, because they were broadcasting exactly what was being played in the clubs. It's not radio dictating what was played in clubs at the time. It was clubs dictating what was played on radio at the time. And I got into Billboard. I followed Billboard charts and Billboard playlists of radio stations, and I really got deeply into following what was being played on New York radio, especially these mix shows. And then, around that time, my dad worked for the government. We moved away. We moved out west. So it was like uprooting a tree that was getting its roots deep and taking it to a place that was foreign, and that's how I felt. I felt really out of place. But it's through that experience that it really solidified my love for music, because there was no internet at the time. And, the only way I could get music that I wanted was from friends sending me tapes and, or buying records. And, while we were living out west, I would come back to New York. I had other than my mom, dad, my sister, and I, all the rest of my family was back here in New York and New Jersey. So I'd come back as much as I could, and I'd always record. I'd go out to clubs, and, I'd get in as much as possible, in other words. But that not having it, that's a big part of why my love for music became so strong.
So, and out west, what was it like out there? Where were you? Were you with horses and cattle?
Yeah. Out west, you heard of the state of Utah, right?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I don't know if people out of the country have, but I'm not most likely. I mean, it's out near Nevada.
The west, it's got all those red mountains. It's the dry. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, well, scenery wise, is beautiful.
It's gorgeous.
But musically, at the time, it wasn't what I was used to, coming from New York. And while I was out there, my mom's a teacher. She taught for a place called Job Corps. So there was a lot of people from inner cities that I got friendly with, and we'd exchange music. So that felt like home away from home for a minute. But then, shortly after graduating from high school, it was like being away at boarding school, in other words, is what it felt like.
You must have been sick to your stomach leaving the whole mecca of being in Disco City
Yeah.
From that culture shock to happy trails to you.
It did a few things for me, besides making it difficult to get the music, and which made me want to get the music even more. It also set me up for, well, I didn't know it. This happened unknowingly. I was in a place I wasn't familiar with. So it really set me up for the future travel because, later in life, how many places would I go that I wasn't familiar with? So I sort of got a good head start with being in places I wasn't familiar with from an early age, in other words, So anyway, when I was back in New York, I would. You mentioned
what year would you say when you came back?
Well, I was coming back all summers and Christmases and holidays for other family members, but I came back full time to live in 1986.
Okay.
In 1986, yeah, I came and I went to Center for Media Arts.
Oh wow, good for you!
I went to Center for Media Arts, and during that early '80 period, when I would come back, we'd go to all the clubs that were happening at the time. And let me just get some water. Hold on. Sorry. You mentioned this. Yeah, you mentioned this before we started. So just think about this for a minute of how vast the scene was in New York for this to even be possible. So this is on my grandparents' block. Okay, on their block, on their corner. You go down. It's the same block that they lived on, but a few blocks down. You know how blocks go for several. You'd be between. You know what I'm saying. So you go down the block, and the club was Plaza Suite. So Plaza Suite is on their block and
on the corner. Everybody,
on the corner.
6 houses, 8 houses up on the corner. It's got a hot spot called Plaza Suite. Go ahead.
Right, and Plaza Suite, and just think they've had artists like Diana Ross. They had Jimmy Bohorn. They would have Sylvester, and artists after artists after artists, and that was one of so many in the neighborhood. That was one of so many clubs in the neighborhood. You mentioned one before with Danny Pucciarelli.
Gallery.
Night Gallery. I think that was Romeo and Juliet before, if I'm remembering correctly. But these are only a couple. There were clubs all over the neighborhood. And you were joking about Saturday Night Fever before, and so many people in the scene today will look at it as, well, that just took it to a commercial level, and it sort of went downhill from there. But the other side of the coin is we have to remember it was a movie being made about real life, real people in a real neighborhood. So, it is depicting how it really was in an area. The cause that, what happened after that to people who were watching it is one thing, but people in the area who it was depicting, there's that side of it too.
Right.
So, right. It was a very lively scene in Brooklyn at that time. And there was so many clubs to pick and choose from. And like you said, people would get real dressed up, and it was a night out was a big thing.
Big time.
Yeah. And couple dancing. I've seen you dance, man. You're an awesome dancer. An awesome dancer. You haven't talked about that, but couple dancing. What you got to do on your show sometime. You got to get your wife with you and do the hustle.
Yeah. I love hustling.
I know you do, and you're great at it.
Thanks. Thank you.
Yeah, you are. But I mean, it's that's really everyone was doing that back then. It might sound funny now, but it's the truth.
But which hustle did you do?
I'm not much. I'm not much of a hustler, but I can tell you, in the early 80s, I got into breaking.
Wait, hang on. But tell people how important it was to dance, to know how to dance. Because if you didn't DJ and you went in the club, what did you do?
That's a great point. Dance.
Right. And why? Why did you dance?
Well, love for music. The music.
And also, most importantly, who was on the dance floor?
Girls.
That's right. And if you knew how to dance?
Right. You get a girl and dance. Sure. No, good point. No, absolutely.
But, you talk about Danny Cole up on that corner. That was the resident DJ for... and those that know, Sammy the Bull Gravano owned that club, who was John Gotti's right-hand man. That was his spot.
Actually, Danny could tell that story of how that happened. Unfortunately,
He's still alive. He's no longer with us either.
I know he passed away. God rest his soul. Great guy.
Nice guy, really nice guy, down to earth.
Great guy.
But Johnny D knows him really well because Johnny used to go there. Johnny DeMario from Henry Street used to always go and hang out with Danny and play with Danny there.
Yeah, sure. And anyway, I mean, I started to go into the city too. I mean, you talk about the garage a lot. Yeah, that's one. There's the Fun House. There's where you played too, was the Underground. What about the Loft? I mean, Dave Mancuso's Loft. That was just awesome. I was a regular at the Loft. And then out in Jersey was Zanzibar. That, these are awesome clubs. And, others, Danceteria. What about Mark Kamen's? There was the Roxy, which was once a roller rink. And Angel loved that. We were talking about Angel. That's what place we went together, Angel and I. And that became 1018 eventually. But, we could talk all day about how many clubs there were in New York at the time. I mean, it was difficult to choose where to go to be honest, for me anyway.
Right. So in those days, so you said you took some piano, some singing. So you did have some musical instruction.
Yeah, I had some. And to be honest, I couldn't really grasp any of it completely. I got the hang of it, but I didn't become a pro at any of that. I got the hang of it and I got the feel for it. But it really, and so that you made a great point there, Len, because taking those lessons and listening to music and collecting records, that was all pointing in the direction of production. It just got to
realizing it yet, right? You didn't even, right. And that's to tell people, explain that. You don't even,
You're so right. The first thing I started, so I took lessons, I started collecting, had a good collection, listening to DJs, clubs, radio, and then these master mixes started to be very popular. This is talking about mid 80s or maybe early mid 80s, like the Big Apple mixes or the Hollywood mixes, where you would hear, many tunes within the matter of 15 minutes, or snippets of many tunes. And it was just bewildering on how that was being done to me, because I didn't discover editing yet. Then. And people like the Latin Rascals were on air, or, you mentioned Tommy before, was the dynamic duo, or there was Aldo Marin, there was Jose Animal Diaz, there was a guy on KTU named Mark Shoshone. I don't know if you remember him.
Oh my God, I forgot about Mark Shoshone.
Yeah, Mark Shoshone, right? And what about Ted Courier? There was
Ed I talked to, nice guy.
Yeah. Jelly Bean Benitez, a guy named Preston Powell, I remember. I even heard, I have a tape of Hippie Torales on KTU as well from 82. But there was so many. There was another guy I was going to mention. Shep Pettibone, of course.
Oh, can't miss Shep. Shep's mix is legendary.
Yeah, and well, then later on, Timmy and Boyd came on. Timmy registered for Boyd Jarvis, and Tony Humphreys too. And anyway, it got me really interested in editing. And the Latin Rascals were just amazing at it. They were masters. I mean, the edits they would do were wow. So when I was going to Center for Media Arts, I then discovered editing and what editing was and how it worked. And I got myself a tape machine and I started editing mixes. And
what tape machine was that, Vic?
It was a Tascam. I got a Tascam. Actually, it was a 4-track, so I would overdub on the edits. It was a Tascam 34B. It was 1/4 inch, and it only went up to 15 IPS. So I would do the edits and then overdub on the edits. So, this is pointing in the production direction. Now, then I finished Center for Media Arts, right? And I'm going to find this article one day, Len, because I saved it. There was an article in Billboard shortly before I graduated, and it talked about Arthur giving new talent a chance. Arthur at Shakedown giving new talent a chance.
I thought you were going to tell me?
Tell me.
From the movie Arthur, what Dudley Moore played. I was like thinking, I hope it's not that Arthur. Is it Arthur Baker? Okay.
Arthur Baker. That's right. Yeah. So yeah, in that article, it talked about how he's open to new talent, and it got me. I was already a fan of his productions. Him and John Roby were doing great things all through the early '80s. And anyway, there was a magazine that was out called Dance Music Report as well. Do you remember that?
Sure I do. DMR.
Yeah, it was a very small magazine, black and white, but it had I loved it. It had all
information,
it had a lot of information. It had and one day I'm looking through it, and there was an ad for the Latin Rascals. They're offering their services to others, and on the ad it had the number for Shakedown. So I called it, and who do you think answered?
Arthur Baker.
Tony Moran.
Tony Moran.
Tony Moran answered, and he was very friendly. And I just told him that I was getting out of Center for Media Arts, and I'd just like to come up there. And he was really friendly and just gave me tips, encouraged me. So
now, everybody, Tony Moran's all over the radio, people. He's hot with the Latin Rascals.
Latin Rascals, right? Yeah, at the top.
Records. He's talking to a superstar right now. He doesn't even really know. He's saying it's Tony Moran, but Tony Moran in those days, I mean, he's still a great DJ and everything. He makes great, but in 80s radio, Tony Moran and Albert Cabrera were making called Latin Rascals. Those edits were to die for. Everybody wanted them on everything, right? Vic Talent. It was like crazy.
Definitely. You could just listen.
Wow, you get old.
Absolutely. You listen to them now. I mean, a lot of their mixes are up online, and you just hear those edits. And remember, they're doing this with tape. This is before computers. Just think about when you're listening to their edits. Just think about how long that takes. And I know where to edit tape, so it's very time consuming. So anyway, I went up to Shakedown. I didn't see Tony when I first went up. There was the manager was named Tim. It might have been. I think it's Tim Scott. I can't believe I remember that. Yeah, this is Tim Scott. So I went up I went up to for the interview. And, because I read that article, so they were looking for interns. And he said, well, no, we're not very interested now. We don't need anybody. But, you keep the number. And if anything comes up, we'll let you know. So I kept the number. Believe me, I kept the number.
I know you did.
So I called every single...
How often did you call them? Come on, tell the story.
I called them for March. I called them April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November. December came around.
Christmas.
December came around. That's December 1987 came around, right? And they said, yes, we need somebody. Can you come in tomorrow? I said, absolutely. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yes.
I will be there. I will be. That was just a dream come true.
I call them every time. This is what I tried to explain to this generation.
Yeah.
And that's, you kept hearing the word no. What did you hear? Yes. I know you must have kept hearing. You said, get out of here, no, right?
What? Hearing no?
Well, you would hear, we don't need you.
Oh, definitely. That's all you'd hear.
And what would you say? So reenact the phone call. Like if you call, hello, yes.
Yeah, hello. I'm just calling back, checking in to see if you need anybody. Could you use an intern?
We don't need nobody. We don't need anybody. No, they spoke back then. We don't need nobody. Who gave you the number, right? They tell you some crazy. You're like, you guys put the ad out months ago. That thing's over already. Why are you still calling it? You get these idiots on the phone. Who are you again? I called last month. What's your name? Victor. Victor Simonelli?
Yeah.
It saw back then. We don't need anybody. Lose my number. Click.
Right. Well, they were a bit more polite than that, but you got the idea of the no. That's for sure.
Why are you calling again? Did we tell you last month? We told you don't call again. We told you no. Which part of no did you not understand? Right?
Yeah, well, you're going to like this. So when I finally got the yes, right? What do you think's going through my mind?
Holy smoke. I don't believe this.
I don't believe it. And what do you think? What do you think I'm thinking I'm going to do when I get there?
Right to work on the tape machine in the studio.
Wow. Right.
That's what you thought. Listen, that's what we all thought. That's the first thing we thought. What happened? Tell them what happened. Tell them what happened. Hey, you walk in the place. What happened?
Right, I got there. I couldn't even barely get in the door. Arthur came down, and it was, wow, I just met, gosh, I'm the hugest fan of Arthur, just doing everything. So Arthur comes down, front door, come on with me, we're going to move house.
What do you mean move house? What do you mean?
Oh, he was moving house. He was moving from 6th Avenue up to, he was moving some of his furniture and belongings from 6th Avenue up to Woodstock, which is upstate.
Oh,
So
wow.
we had a van, and we had to load the van, bring it all up there, and unload it. That was my first internship day on the job.
Well,
I didn't even get to see the studio that day, but I got to spend time with Arthur, and
that's a good way to begin because you got to work with him. You get to know him.
you got to work with him. You listen. It takes work, Len.
All right, hang on a second. Take a